think social media platforms are different from publishers, and social media based around user-generated content will mean that a company having to pre-check everything that's posted would create difficulties that would be difficult for a social media site to exist. Because there's an immediacy and people are commenting with their own thoughts and creating their own content. But social media companies are not as simple as just people generating content, they post it and people read it or they don't read it. If you watch a film on YouTube, YouTube recommends the film you should watch next. That's not a user that's done that, YouTube are doing that. The next up feature is something they've created to direct you towards content it wants you to see. What you see in your Facebook newsfeed reflects what Facebook thinks you want to see. What you see when you go onto Twitter now, initially reflects the things that Twitter thinks you're interested in seeing. So in that regard, their companies behave like publishers because they are curating and presenting the content in a similar way, different to the way a publisher would. I think that means they have, and of course they do that, and they sell the data they have on their user base to advertisers and help advertisers target people with information they think they'd like to see. So these are characteristics that are more similar to a publisher, even though it is different from a publisher in the way content is generated. I think what we have to do then is look at a new definition of what a social media platform is and what the obligations and the liabilities that company has towards the content that is created and shared. So where content is where content is harmful and is posted on the site and it's referred by a user and the company doesn't act against that content, should they face a legal liability for that? Where there are steps using technology that a company could easily take to identify harmful content before it's referred to it by a user, should we expect them to do it?
I love social media. I owe it my business. On the other hand, the small businesses that it's empowered, it's already started to kill some of them. I mean, we're lucky we're not that dependent on it, but a lot of businesses are.
I'm not bothered about preserving the traditional media in aspect here, or things staying the same. The Eye is only 7 years old, so it's 3 weeks younger than Instagram. The idea is, we want to be a disruptive challenger brand, and for me, change is good. So we also relied a great deal in those early days on word of mouth. One of the things we know is that news these days is more popular than ever. That's great for us, that's great for the social platforms, colossal demand for it. Social platforms are the biggest distributors of news content on earth. They offer us unprecedented scale. Bigger audiences than we could have ever have reached before. The thing that's the biggest challenge, I think, probably for most news brands at the moment is around the news ecosystem, and the fact it's not working, time's running out. You have news publishers producing so much marketable content online, and yet and really getting quite a small fraction of the advertising revenue running alongside it. That's unsustainable. There's a real desperate need, I think, to find a sustainable model for funding high-quality journalism, regardless of platform.
I just wanted to, this comes from the highest level. I want to just read you a quote from our CEO, Sundar, about how we try to think about things, because I think it frames the debate quite well from a Google perspective. Google cares deeply about journalism. Yes, because of the crucial role it plays in democratic society, ensuring the spread of knowledge and the free flow of information, but also because the value of our services, like search, is directly related to having a rich and sustainable knowledge ecosystem. And I think in the 7 years that I've been at Google, we've been trying much more to be a better partner to the news industry. I think we've moved from linear to an ecosystem, and that's changing, and I think we'll continue to change. Right? And so we need to be really cognizant of that. It's not going to be, oh, well, let's solve this now, and then actually it's all done. But also I think when we look at, I believe that the phrase platforms is actually not very helpful. Because platforms normally refers to Google, Apple, Facebook, and Amazon. And actually, those are four fundamentally different companies that do actually very different things with very different business models.
Go on. What is your view? Should we have an editorial code?
So I think from a Google perspective, and again, look at what Google does as a search engine, we actually do, right? And we have our search quality guidelines. This is 160 pages of a public document that actually states what we do when we look at search, right? We have community guidelines as well. So we actually believe that we do have we do have guidelines, and because we do take these responsibilities very seriously. But I think just to your point about platforms, I think platforms was used as a word in the beginning, in the early days, and what happened was that it then became a simplification. right? And I think that's the problem that we're having right now in that debate, is that it's been simplified to platforms, and I think we need to think in a more nuanced way.
Well, I think the distinction is between a curated space that someone owns. So a news is a curated space, be it the Guardian website, the printed paper, or the 6 o'clock news on the BBC. Someone has commissioned and collected that content and are presenting it to you in a way that they think is important. And the platform is different. It is like it's a semi-curated space. It uses algorithms to try and select and promote and push certain content, but it's not creating it itself. And therefore the question is, what responsibility then does the platform have to the way in which content is prioritised and shared on it, even though it hasn't made it itself?
I feel there's perhaps 3 areas of responsibility. You know, one is social responsibility, and that comes around the sort of argument around proactivity. You know, how proactive are you to try and identify harmful content in the first place? Obviously, you know, you can then act on it if people flag it to you afterwards. And the 2 particular areas there, one is politics, which is subject of the committee's work, and in the States as well, and many other countries around the world, and one is inciting hate. There's an area then of legal responsibility. You know, do we need a new legal definition? Platforms, I agree, doesn't really do it. Publishers, well, clearly there are some aspects that are very similar to publishers. And the final one is commercial responsibility. And you've seen some of the world's biggest brands demand it. You know, P&G and Unilever talking of transparency in, I think P&G said at worst, a fraudulent supply chain. And Unilever's Keith Weed a few weeks ago concerned about content and transparency. So those are the 3 main areas, I think.
Well, you look at, I think there's a danger as well. When we were in America, we spoke privately quite a lot of people about this, is that actually then certainly when you look at politics and say extreme views, maybe not sort of radicalisation or inciting violence, but extreme political views, actually what the platforms do is they give you more of it. If you start engaging with films from right-wing groups on YouTube, YouTube will suggest more of them, and maybe even more extreme ones, because it thinks that's what you want. If you start engaging with pages on Facebook that promote anger about immigrant populations, it will give you more of it, and you'll start receiving more of it, and you'll start to believe that actually lots of other people share your views, and your views are not extreme, they're actually quite mainstream. Well, so political advertising, so Facebook accepted payment in rubles for political advertising to run on Facebook in the American presidential election, in breach of US election law. Okay? So Facebook's view on that is it's not our responsibility to spot that happening, but if we get told this has happened, we will cooperate with an investigation by the electoral authorities or the law enforcement agency in that country to verify that's what happened.
And who's going to tell them? Someone flagging up?
Yeah, but if you're a bank, this is a point we made in the hearing, if you're a bank and you said, well, someone's been laundering money through our bank for years, but you know, no one told us we should do anything about it, so we just didn't, so we just let them. You know, I mean, there are lots of other complex areas of life where there are billions of transactions all the time, but there are legal responsibilities and obligations placed on companies to monitor actual wrongdoing when it takes place. And at the moment, certainly companies like Facebook do not believe that they have that responsibility, and in law at the moment they're right.
I wanted to pick up on a point about trusted content as well, just talking here. There's a huge opportunity here for trusted news brands. You can see it with what Sam was talking about there. And this is true not just in the UK, you know, but if you look at some of the news brands who, trusted news brands been investing in content in the UK, you know, I would include I among them, but you can also look at, I don't know, the Times, the FT, Guardian. You can look at the US, where the New York Times and the Washington Post are seeing record subscriptions off the back of the Trump presidency. You know, people really want to understand what's happening, digest it, analyse it. Back in the UK, you know, we all know some of the challenges the magazine industry's faced, but that's not the case at Private Eye or The Economist or The Spectator. Again, record audiences. So there's a real opportunity here for trusted news brands. Trust is, there's a premium on it. The news ecosystem needs to work though. You know, I sound like a stuck record coming back round to this. There's all sorts of things. Google, a great example actually, and the sort of dialogue that that we were having before and during this debate around things like the Digital News Initiative or AMP, you know, accelerated mobile pages, double click, Google Trends, Google, you know, loads of tools here for news publishers to try and use to build their businesses.
We also need to make sure that we don't think that there is a solution or one solution or the silver bullet, and I think often we kind of go, well, you know, it's what I call the false messiah. Oh, this is going to solve it, right? You know, this is going to solve it. You know, I remember when the iPad was it was going to save journalism, right? And then you moved on, and then it was native advertising was going to do it, and then the metered paywall. And But I think that actually diversification is going to be that element, and how do you do that in an appropriate way?
I think there's another, on advertising, I think there's another issue here as well, which we touched on yesterday in our hearing with the Information Commissioner, which is actually on audiences, is what incentives could we create so that the tech companies have got a greater commercial incentive, particularly Facebook, to identify fake accounts that are in breach of their community guidelines, that are distributing problematic content, because they sell those audiences as real people. There's an assumption when they sell to an advertiser that every one of those people, every one of the accounts, it meets the community guidelines. And the Sunday Times exposes quite neatly with when they sought to go and buy advertising for 18 to 34-year-olds in the UK. Facebook told them the user audience for that age group is 17 million. According to the national census, there are only 12.5 million people of that age group in the country. But that's being sold. But that audience is being sold. So actually, could be saying, you should be doing. Should advertisers be demanding, or even the Competition and Markets Authority be demanding that actually you should make sure those are verifiable real numbers.